You've seen the fantasy version of an EMP 1,000 times by now. One bright flash, every vehicle on the freeway goes silent, the streetlights die forever, and within 48 hours people are apparently fighting over canned peaches in a parking lot. Hollywood loves that scenario. YouTube thumbnails love it even more. And I get it. It's dramatic, it gets clicks, and it sounds terrifying enough that you'll sit through a 10-minute ad for a solar generator. But here's what drives me up the wall. That version of events doesn't match the actual data we have. Not even close. And because people keep repeating the apocalypse version, they either panic buy a bunch of overpriced junk they don't need, or they dismiss the whole topic as tinfoil hat nonsense and do nothing at all. Both of those responses are wrong, and both of them leave you worse off than just understanding what this thing actually is. So that's what we're doing today. I'm going to walk you through what an EMP really does based on the evidence that exists, not based on somebody's screenplay. Then I'm going to give you the categories of things that genuinely keep functioning when the grid drops out. And here's the part that might surprise you. Preparing for this is cheap, it's boring, and it's almost identical to preparing for a nasty ice storm that knocks your power out for a week. That's the real punchline of this entire conversation. Let's start at the foundation. What is an EMP in terms a normal person can actually use? Strip away all the technical language, and an electromagnetic pulse is exactly what the name says. A sudden, intense burst of electromagnetic energy. That's it. Think of it like a shockwave, except instead of moving through air and knocking things over, it moves through the electromagnetic spectrum and overloads electrical systems. There are two sources that matter to you and me. The first is the man-made variety. A nuclear weapon detonated at extreme altitude, way up in the atmosphere, produces a multi-phase pulse. The initial phase is blindingly fast. We're talking nanoseconds. And it's the one that can overwhelm small, sensitive electronic components that are exposed and unprotected. Then there's a secondary phase, a slower, rolling surge that behaves very differently. It doesn't care about the phone in your pocket. It goes after long conductors. Think power transmission lines stretching across hundreds of miles, pipelines, anything that acts like a giant antenna collecting that energy and funneling it into the hardware at the endpoints. The second source, and this is the one that deserves way more of your attention, is the sun itself. A geomagnetic storm happens when the sun ejects a massive burst of charged particles toward Earth. When those particles interact with our magnetic field, they induce currents in those same long conductors I just mentioned. The effect on the power grid is remarkably similar to that slower phase of a nuclear EMP. And unlike the nuclear scenario, which requires a very specific set of geopolitical circumstances, the sun does this on its own schedule, and it doesn't ask permission. Hang on to that distinction, because it's going to matter a lot as we go through this. The fast pulse threatens small exposed electronics. The slow pulse, whether it comes from a bomb or from the sun, threatens the grid, and the grid is where the real vulnerability lives. Now let's demolish the biggest myth, because this is where most people's understanding goes completely sideways. The US government actually tested this. The EMP Commission, which spent years studying this exact problem, put 37 automobiles into an EMP simulator. These weren't hand-picked vehicles. They ranged from mid-1980s models all the way through early 2000s cars with varying levels of onboard electronics. The result that everybody on the internet expects, every car dead, highway frozen in place, pure chaos, didn't happen. It flat out didn't happen. The vast majority of those vehicles kept running through the test. At the highest field strengths they blasted these cars with, a total of 3 vehicles had their engines quit, and most of those restarted without any major intervention. Below certain exposure levels, roughly 9 out of 10 cars showed no serious operational problems at all. Now, does that mean your brand new car with 14 computers in it is guaranteed to survive? No. Modern vehicles have significantly more electronic integration than those test subjects did, and we don't have comprehensive public testing on current models. But the direction of the evidence is the exact opposite of the movie. The data says most cars would probably keep running or restart. Not all, most. That's a world apart from a frozen apocalypse on every highway in the country. So right out of the gate, the single most feared consequence, every vehicle simultaneously dead, is the one that the actual testing argues against most strongly. That should recalibrate your entire thinking about this subject. If you're getting something out of this, drop a like, leave a comment about what you're already doing to prepare, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Let's keep going. Here's where I want to shift your focus. Because the realistic version of this scenario isn't a warhead at all, it's a solar event. And unlike the nuclear version, which lives in the realm of what if, the solar version has a track record with receipts. March 1989. A geomagnetic storm slammed into Earth's magnetic field, and within roughly 90 seconds, not 90 minutes, 90 seconds, the entire Hydro-Quebec power grid collapsed. 6 million people lost electricity in the middle of a Canadian winter. The outage lasted approximately 9 hours in most areas. And this wasn't contained to one province. That same storm pushed geomagnetically induced currents deep into the United States and physically damaged a large power transformer at a facility in New Jersey. That happened? That's not a projection or a model or a war game. That is a documented event within the lifetime of most people watching this. Rewind further to 1859, the Carrington event, the most powerful geomagnetic storm in recorded history. At that time, the telegraph was essentially the only electrical technology civilization had, and the storm set telegraph offices on fire. Operators received electrical shocks from their equipment. Paper caught fire from the current flowing through the lines. And that was with a technology that was laughably simple by modern standards. Now imagine the same event hitting a planet covered in interconnected electronic infrastructure. You don't even have to imagine it theoretically, because in July of 2012, the sun fired off a coronal mass ejection every bit as powerful as the Carrington event. NASA tracked it carefully. It tore through the exact orbital path Earth had been traveling, about 1 week earlier, 7 days. If the timing had been slightly different, it would have been a direct hit on the planet. NASA's own scientists stated publicly that the consequences would have been severe and global in scope. So when I talk about preparing for this, I am asking you to prepare for something that has already happened in a milder form within our lifetimes, and something that nearly happened in its worst form about 14 years ago. This isn't science fiction. This is solar physics, and the sun doesn't care about your schedule. Let's talk about what actually breaks, because this is where the practical value lives, and where most content creators get it completely backwards. They focus on your gadgets, your phone, your laptop, your smart refrigerator. And while those things might be at some risk depending on proximity, exposure, and whether they're plugged in, they are not the primary concern. The primary concern is the electrical grid itself. Those transmission lines running hundreds of miles across the countryside act as enormous antennas during a geomagnetic event. They absorb that induced energy and channel it directly into the equipment at either end, specifically, the large power transformers that step voltage down for distribution to your neighborhood. Here's the part that should genuinely concern you, and it's not dramatic, it's logistical. Those transformers are not mass-produced items sitting in a warehouse somewhere. Many of them are custom engineered for their specific location and load requirements. They are enormous. Some weigh hundreds of tons. They are primarily manufactured overseas, and the lead time from order to delivery and installation is not weeks. It's months. In many cases, it exceeds a year. Some estimates put the wait at 18 months or longer for certain specifications. The United States does not maintain a large strategic reserve of these transformers, because each one costs millions of dollars, and nobody has budgeted for losing dozens or hundreds simultaneously. So the honest threat model isn't that your toaster dies. It's that if a severe event damages a significant number of these transformers across a broad geographic area, the power doesn't come back quickly. We're not talking hours like Quebec in 1989. We could be talking weeks, potentially months, while those custom units are manufactured, shipped, and installed. That is the scenario that deserves your respect and your preparation, not the fried blender. The slow, grinding logistics of replacing industrial equipment that was never meant to be replaced in bulk. Your smaller electronics are a mixed picture. Anything plugged into the wall has its power cord acting as a small antenna, and the connection to the building's wiring gives that energy a path straight into the device. That's a vulnerability. But a phone sitting in your pocket, powered off, disconnected from everything? The evidence suggests that's a much better bet. Disconnected and simple is the theme here, and it's going to keep showing up. Let me give you the mental model that makes all of this click. Because once you have it, you won't need to memorize a single list. Think of an EMP event like a flash flood, but for electronics. The water rushes in fast, and it destroys whatever is sitting at the low point, in the path. What survives? Whatever is on high ground. For electronics, high ground means one of three things: unplugged from everything, mechanically simple with nothing to fry, or sealed inside a metal enclosure. That's it. Every single thing I'm about to recommend falls into one of those three buckets. So if you forget every detail of this conversation, remember that framework, and you can figure the rest out yourself. Hit that like button if this is making sense, drop a comment with your setup, and subscribe if you haven't. Alright, let's get into the specific categories. Category 1. Purely mechanical and manual tools. The hand tools in your garage. A manual can opener, strike anywhere matches, and a reliable lighter. A hand crank grain mill. A push reel mower. A French press or a percolator for coffee. A manual egg beater. A hand-operated water pump. A crosscut saw. An axe. A brace and bit for drilling. None of these objects contains a circuit board, a microprocessor, or a semiconductor of any kind. An electromagnetic pulse passes through them the way wind passes through a chain-link fence. There's nothing there to interact with. This is why your grandparents' stuff suddenly looks like genius engineering. Not because they predicted electromagnetic threats, but because they built tools around mechanical principles that simply don't have a failure mode related to electrical surges. A hand crank drill works after an EMP, for the same reason it works after you drop it in a lake. There's nothing electronic to damage. Walk through your house mentally and ask yourself one question about each thing you rely on daily. Does a non-electric version of this exist? Light, an oil lamp, a candle, a hand crank flashlight. Cooking, a wood-burning stove, a charcoal grill, a rocket stove you can build from cinder blocks in your backyard. Opening cans, the manual opener in the drawer. Heat, a wood stove, a kerosene heater rated for indoor use. Water, a hand pump on a well, gravity-fed rain collection, stored water in food-grade containers. Sanitation, you'd be surprised how far a 5-gallon bucket, some heavy-duty bags, and a supply of lime or kitty litter goes when the toilets stop flushing because the municipal pumps are down. You don't have to live without electricity every day. That's not the point. The point is to own the manual backup so that on the day the powered version goes quiet, you don't even blink. You just reach into the closet and grab the thing that doesn't care whether the grid exists. Our great-grandparents ran entire productive households and farms on nothing but these tools. That knowledge isn't extinct. It's sitting in the back of a drawer, on a shelf in the garage, or in a book you can print out and keep on hand. Category 2. Older vehicles and simple engines with minimal or no computer dependency. We already covered the EMP Commission's testing results. Even modern cars largely survived, but the absolute safest bet is the machine with the fewest electronic components to begin with. A pre-1980 truck with a carbureted engine and a points-based ignition system has essentially zero electronic vulnerability. An old tractor with a mechanical fuel injection system. A basic pull-start generator with a simple engine. A chainsaw. A rototiller from the 1970s. I think about a guy, let's call him Marvin. He's a composite. A former dairy hand-up in Wisconsin who keeps an old pickup truck running that most people would have sent to the scrapyard a decade ago. He's also got an ancient tractor that his kids keep telling him to sell. People give him grief about it. But Marvin's quiet logic is unassailable. Those machines ask nothing of the modern world. No computer chips, no electronic fuel injection, no networked sensors. You turn a key or pull a cord, and the engine either fires or it doesn't, and the reasons it might not fire are all mechanical and fixable with hand tools in the driveway. I'm not telling you to run out and buy a 1972 Ford. Please don't do that based on this conversation. That's the panic response, and the testing data doesn't justify panic purchasing. What I am telling you is that if you already own a simple, reliable older machine, a basic generator, a hand-start mower, an older vehicle that runs well, don't be in a rush to replace it with something computerized just because it's not shiny. The thing that asks the least from modern infrastructure is the thing that depends least on it, and that's a strength, not a deficiency. And while we're here, let me mention small portable generators with basic engines. A simple pull-start generator running a single-cylinder gas engine with minimal electronic controls is a powerhouse in any extended outage. Pair it with stored fuel, properly stabilized with fuel stabilizer and rotated every 6 to 12 months, and you've got the ability to run a refrigerator, charge batteries, or power a well pump intermittently for weeks. The key is simplicity. The fewer electronic control modules between the pull cord and the electrical output, the more resilient that machine is against any kind of surge event. Keep it maintained, keep fuel on hand, and know how to operate it safely outdoors with proper ventilation. Carbon monoxide kills more people in blackouts than the blackout itself. Never run a generator indoors, in a garage, or near open windows. That's non-negotiable. Category 3. Small electronics stored inside a Faraday cage. This is where I get to tear apart one of the most profitable myths on the survival internet. because entire businesses are built on making this sound complicated and expensive. It is neither. A Faraday cage is a sealed metal enclosure. That's all it is. The electromagnetic energy hits the outer metal surface and flows around the outside instead of penetrating to the interior. Michael Faraday demonstrated this principle in the 1830s, and it hasn't changed since. A metal trash can with a tight-fitting metal lid is a Faraday cage. A metal ammunition can with the rubber seal intact is a Faraday cage. A metal filing cabinet with the drawers closed and no gaps is very close to a Faraday cage. The requirements are straightforward. The metal must form a continuous enclosure around the contents, and the contents should not be in direct contact with the interior metal surface. Line the inside with cardboard, a towel, or bubble wrap. Done. You do not need to bury it. You do not need to ground it. Grounding a Faraday cage for EMP protection is one of the most persistent myths online, and it causes people to either overcomplicate the project or give up entirely. For the purpose of blocking an electromagnetic pulse, the ungrounded metal enclosure works. Full stop. If you're finding this useful, take 2 seconds. Like, comment, subscribe. It helps more than you'd think. Back to it. Here's the part I genuinely enjoy, because you can verify this yourself in about 3 minutes with zero cost. Take a small AM/FM radio, tune it to a strong local station, turn the volume up, set it inside your metal can, line it so it's not touching the bare metal walls, put the lid on tight. If the can is working as a Faraday cage, that station will either disappear completely or collapse into static. The metal is blocking the radio waves from reaching the antenna inside, and radio waves and EMP energy are the same fundamental phenomenon at different intensities. If it blocks one, it blocks the other. If you still hear the station clearly, your lid has a gap or your seal isn't complete. Adjust and test again. This is empirical, repeatable, and free. What goes inside? Think about what you'd genuinely be lost without if the power went down for weeks and your primary devices were damaged. A small hand-crank AM/FM weather radio. This is arguably the single most important item because information determines every decision you make in a crisis. A good LED flashlight with spare batteries. A small solar charger panel. A cheap prepaid smartphone loaded with your contact list, copies of your important documents, offline maps of your area, and any critical medical information. A USB thumb drive with duplicates of everything on that phone. A basic set of walkie-talkies for communicating with family members across short distances without cellular infrastructure. Store everything powered off. You don't need any of it running. You need it functional on the day you open the can. The budget version, if you don't want to buy a trash can, is heavy-duty aluminum foil. Wrap each item in a layer of cloth or plastic to insulate it, then wrap it in 3 or 4 tight overlapping layers of heavy-duty foil with no gaps or tears. It's fussier to get right than a solid metal can, and it's easier to accidentally puncture, but the principle is identical, and the cost is a few dollars. Category 4. Battery and solar power stored, disconnected. A small portable solar panel, sitting in a box in your closet, not wired into anything, is on high ground. There's no path for surge energy to reach it because it's not connected to any conductor. Same logic applies to spare rechargeable batteries, a portable power station, or a basic battery bank. The vulnerability comes from connection. Being plugged into the wall, being wired into the house system, being part of a long cable run that can act as an antenna. Equipment stored loose, disconnected, and ideally inside that same Faraday enclosure is in a strong position to survive. And here's what makes this category especially smart. This is exactly the same gear that gets you through any ordinary extended power outage. A portable solar panel and a battery bank are useful after a hurricane, an ice storm, a wildfire evacuation, or a transformer failure on your street. You're not buying this equipment for some hypothetical electromagnetic doomsday. You're buying it because power outages happen all the time for completely mundane reasons, and this gear handles all of them. The EMP resilience is a free bonus on top of the everyday utility. Keep a few sets of common battery sizes in that metal can too. AA, AAA, D cells, whatever your flashlights and radio take. Batteries stored at room temperature in a sealed container will hold their charge for years and years. Category 5. Analog and non-electric information storage. No pulse ever generated, by any means, can affect a piece of paper. A printed map of your local area and region. A handwritten list of every important phone number. Family, doctor, insurance, bank, neighbors. A hard copy of your critical documents. Identification, insurance policies, medical records, prescriptions. Cash and small bills, because if the electronic payment systems are down, cash is the only medium of exchange that still functions. The physical manuals for your generator, your vehicle, your medical equipment. A good general reference book on first aid, basic home repair, water purification, or food preservation. Think about how much of your critical information currently exists only on devices that require electricity and internet connectivity to access. Your phone numbers are in your phone. Your documents are in the cloud. Your maps are in an app. Your money is a number on a bank's server. Every single one of those becomes inaccessible in a prolonged grid-down scenario. The person who has physical copies of the important stuff is the person who stays calm, because they can still reach their family, navigate their area, prove their identity, and conduct transactions. I came across a couple once, composite, not real names, whose entire emergency plan existed solely in one spouse's head. Every contact number, every rendezvous point, every account detail, all memorized by one person and never written down. The day that person was traveling and unreachable during a regional emergency, the other spouse had effectively no plan at all. Don't replicate that mistake. Write it down. Print it out. Put it in a binder. Put the binder somewhere everyone in the household knows about. Category 6. Stored water and non-electric water purification. This is the one people consistently underestimate, and I'm adding it because it's arguably more important than everything above it. In a prolonged grid-down scenario, your municipal water supply is running on borrowed time. The pumps that push water through the system, the treatment plants that make it safe to drink, all of it runs on electricity. Most facilities have backup generators with fuel supplies measured in days, not weeks. Store water. The general guidance is a minimum of 1 gallon per person per day, and you want at least a 2-week supply if you can manage it. That's 14 gallons per person. For a family of 4, that's 56 gallons, which is roughly 3 standard 55-gallon drums worth, minus some breathing room. You can also use commercially available water storage containers, or simply rotate cases of bottled water on a shelf in the garage. Beyond storage, own a way to purify water that doesn't require electricity. A gravity-fed ceramic filter system works without power and can process thousands of gallons before the filters need replacement. Water purification tablets are cheap, lightweight, and last for years in storage. Boiling works if you have a heat source. A basic understanding of which local water sources exist near your home, streams, ponds, rivers, rainwater collection, gives you options when the tap goes dry. Don't overlook rain catchment either. A simple tarp and barrel system can collect a surprising volume of drinkable water during a single rainstorm once you filter it. The setup costs almost nothing and requires zero electricity. Water is the one resource with no substitute and no workaround. Everything else on this list becomes secondary if you don't solve the water problem first. Like, comment, subscribe. Takes 3 seconds, keeps this content coming. Moving on. Category 7. Community and neighborhood relationships. This one has no price tag, and it doesn't fit in a metal can, but it outperforms every piece of equipment on this list. A long-duration power outage is not survived by lone individuals in fortified basements. It's survived by streets, neighborhoods, and small communities that pool resources, share information, check on vulnerable members, and divide labor. Do you know your immediate neighbors? Do they know you? Does anyone on your street have medical training? Does anyone have a generator? Does anyone keep a large garden or have experience with food preservation? Does anyone have a well with a hand pump? In a grid-down scenario lasting weeks, the street that communicates and cooperates is the street that eats, stays warm, and gets accurate information. The household that tries to go it alone runs out of something critical much faster. This doesn't require joining a group or attending meetings. It requires knowing the names of the people within a few hundred yards of your front door, having a basic conversation about what you'd each do if the power stayed off for an extended period, and agreeing to check on each other. That's it. That social infrastructure is more resilient than any piece of hardware you can buy. Now, let's talk about the first 24 hours, because if any version of this ever actually happens, the calm moves are simple, and they're universal to any major outage regardless of cause. First, determine the scope. Pull that backup radio out of the metal can and listen. There is an enormous difference between your block being out because a car hit a pole and your entire region being dark because of a geomagnetic event. You cannot determine which one it is by looking out your window. The radio tells you what you're dealing with, and that information shapes every decision you make next. Second, water. Immediately. Before you do anything else, fill every bathtub, every large pot, every container you own. If you have a water heater, that tank holds 30 to 50 gallons of drinkable water right now. But once the system depressurizes, you can't get more. The window for capturing water from the existing pressure in the pipes is short. Act on it before you do anything else. Third, manage your remaining electronics ruthlessly. If your phone survived, it's now one of the most valuable things you own. Not for social media, but for the contacts, photos, documents, and information stored on it. Dim the screen to minimum. Close every app. Turn off Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and location services. Switch to airplane mode. That battery needs to last days, not hours. Fourth, go outside and check on your neighbors, specifically the elderly, anyone living alone, anyone with medical equipment that requires electricity, and anyone with small children. This is not optional kindness. It's practical strategy. The faster your immediate community shares information and coordinates, the better everyone's outcome. Fifth, assess your food situation rationally. Your refrigerator will keep food safe for about 4 hours if you keep the door shut. A full freezer holds temperature for roughly 48 hours, half full about 24. Eat the perishable food first. The canned goods and dry staples are your long game. Don't ration on day one. Eat well and think clearly. Rationing comes later if the situation warrants it. None of that requires a single item you'd buy only for an EMP. It's just the calm, methodical first day of any serious extended outage. You already have the instincts for it. You just need to think it through before it happens rather than during. And here's the realization I want you to walk away with, because it's the most liberating thing about this entire topic. Go back and look at every single category I just covered. Manual tools, simple engines, a metal can with a radio, disconnected solar and battery gear, paper copies of important information, stored water, neighborhood relationships. Every single one of those is exactly what you'd want for an ordinary week-long blackout from a hurricane, a derecho, an ice storm, a wildfire, or a grid failure from a busted transformer. There is almost nothing on this list that you would buy exclusively for an electromagnetic pulse event and have no other use for. That means you cannot waste your money here. Every dollar you spend on this preparation has immediate utility for the far more common, far more likely scenarios that happen every single year across this country. You do not need the $2,000 EMP-hardened survival kit that some company with scary marketing is trying to sell you. You need a metal trash can, a $20 hand crank radio, some tools you probably half own already, a stack of printed information, some stored water, and the discipline to introduce yourself to the people on your street. If the big rare solar event never comes in your lifetime, and in any given year, that's the statistically likely outcome, you've simply built a household that handles common emergencies without breaking a sweat. You win either way. That's not fear, that's just competence, stored in a closet. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me your most trusted no electronics tool. Hit the bell so you catch the next one. I think about a household I'll call the Pruitts. Composite, not real people, but representative of a real type. 2 retirees on a ridge in the hills, power goes out on them a half dozen times a year just from weather. For them, this entire conversation is almost academic. They've already got the wood heat, the hand tools, the root cellar, the oil lamps, the rain barrels, the old truck in the barn, and the deep-seated habit of doing a day's work without flipping a single switch. An EMP, a solar storm, a fallen power line, a thunderstorm. To the Pruitts, it's all the same event. The power's out again, and they barely adjust their routine because their routine never fully depended on the grid in the first place. That's the destination. Not a bunker crammed with expensive electromagnetic hardening equipment and a year's supply of freeze-dried meals. A life that simply doesn't collapse when the grid takes a vacation, whether that vacation lasts 6 hours or 6 weeks. You get there with cheap things, simple things, disconnected things, a little knowledge printed on paper, and relationships with the people around you. And you get there one step at a time, not in a single panicked shopping spree after watching a scary video. To the person watching who's felt embarrassed for even thinking about this, who's been told by family or friends that they're paranoid, that they watch too many of these videos, that nothing bad is going to happen, here's the documented reality. The sun knocked out a modern power grid serving 6 million people in 1989. A Carrington-class solar storm missed Earth by approximately 1 week in 2012. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's data from NASA, the agency that puts robots on Mars. Wanting a backup radio in a metal can and some phone numbers on a piece of paper is not paranoia. It's the same basic instinct your grandparents followed when they kept the oil lamp on the shelf after the power lines reached their farmhouse. They weren't afraid. They just understood that the new system was convenient, not infallible. And they kept the old system within arm's reach because they'd lived long enough to know that convenient things break sometimes. You can be calm and ready at the same time. In fact, calm is the only version of ready that actually works when things go sideways. Panic makes bad decisions. Preparation makes options. And the beautiful thing about this particular subject is that you get to put the fear down entirely. You don't have to believe an EMP is coming. You don't have to pick a political side on it. You don't have to watch the sky, or track solar cycles, or argue with anyone online about probability estimates. You just put a radio in a can, keep some things on paper, hold on to the simple tools, store some water, know your neighbors, and then go live your normal life with the quiet confidence that if the lights ever stay off longer than usual, for any reason at all, you're the household that just keeps going. Prepared is a calm word. Keep it that way. Drop a comment and tell me, what's the one simple no electronics tool in your house you'd trust on the worst day? I'll see you in the next one.